tell you what our totals are for the giving that we have experienced over the last almost year, and also give you the Liberty Offering numbers. I just want to first of all tell you that I am so proud to say that I am your pastor. I mean, it is nothing more exciting to see what you guys have done as a generous church. And I want to encourage you, and even in a tough economic time, you have stepped up, you have sacrificed, and I want to give you some totals here just to let you know what you have done ever since the beginning. Really, we started Kingdom Builders back in November of last year, and so I want to give you some totals here, and then I want to tell you what we're going to be able to do for the Dream Center and something cool about the Dream Center as well. So Kingdom Builders is our monthly give that we do as a church for people who are really connected. And this year so far, we have received $228,062.76. That is money that you guys have given on a weekly basis. Some of you have stepped up and really given big towards that. I mean, amazing. We raised for the chairs, we did a grab a seat deal at the beginning of the year to purchase the 750 chairs, and you gave $29,994.53 towards that. And then over the last 30 days, and we still actually have some more money coming in, but you gave, just in the last 30 days, $114,844.43. Isn't that great? Come on, give yourselves a hand. And so interestingly enough, I was watching television the other day, and I'm not a huge Christian television fan. You probably heard me make fun of them and stuff like that, but I just happened to go on the Christian television channel, and there was Matthew Barnett, and he was talking about the new Emancipated Youth Facility that we are giving, and we're going to take 10% of our Liberty Offering, which we have a couple more things that are happening this week that we couldn't fit into 30 days. Our life groups are doing something, and our teens have really stepped up, and so we're going to take 10% of the Liberty Offering and give it to the Dream Center. But check this out. It was totally by accident, at least that's what Matthew Barnett's saying, is they are naming the Dream Center Emancipated Youth Facility Freedom House. Isn't that crazy? Can you believe that? So I texted him. I was like, Matthew, come on, that's a great name for an Emancipated Youth Facility. He goes, man, it was totally by accident. I'm like, yeah, right, sure. Sure it was. Well, I'm excited. You know, one of the things that I really live for is hearing the stories of people who have decided to move to Charlotte, North Carolina. I hear them all the time where people will come to me and they'll say, hey, Pastor, I didn't move here because I was looking for a job. I didn't move here because I was maybe in a relationship, or I didn't move here because of my family. I didn't move here because of circumstances. I just felt like God told me to move to Charlotte, North Carolina. They get plugged in the church, and then they discover why God had them move. They discover that their life has been missing a very integral part, and that is serving the people that God has called them to serve. And so as I began to prepare for this week and think about this message beyond me, the last message in this series, everybody said, oh, because I know you really enjoyed this. I've enjoyed it. And I started to think about how many people have really gone beyond themselves when it comes to their relationship with God, but also in their service to other people. And they've really began to understand this. And God has relocated them specifically to connect with the church. And sometimes it takes 6 months, a year, 2 years, and they'll come to me and they'll say, I had no idea how God wanted to use me. And then they start listing all the people that they've had an opportunity to minister to, whether it's as a life group leader or serving their children, and watch them grow up over the last 3 or 4 years. There's nothing more exciting to see one of the children that you're serving in the children's ministry go through the children's ministry, grow up, and then come out and you see them lifting their hands and worshiping God, and you go, you know what? I had a part to play. God used me, helped me, showed me, impacted me as a result of their life change. Isn't that great? One of my favorite restaurants, I don't know if you've ever been to one of these restaurants, but it's called a Brazilian steakhouse. You ever been to a Brazilian steakhouse? How many of y'all been to a Brazilian steakhouse? I've actually been in Brazil several times, and they're real. They don't just use them in America. They're actually in Brazil. And if you've never been to one, they have one here in town called Chima. And they have them all over the country. They have one in Atlanta that we go to all the time when I go down there and visit our pastors in Atlanta called Fogo de Chao. And I think they put the chow on the end because when you go, you chow, baby. I mean, you tear it up. It is a man's man kind of place. And if you like meat, the Brazilian Steakhouse is the place to go. I mean, they have every kind of meat you could ever experience in your entire life. I'm already getting hungry. I already ate. I'm already getting hungry. They have filet mignon. They have chicken. They have little tiny sausages. They have roasted sirloin. They have lamb. They have lamb chops. They have pork chops. They have filet wrapped in bacon. They have bacon wrapped in bacon. Anybody they have everything. And they have these guys, and they have on these big skewers. And the interesting thing about it is they have these little cards that look like this. There's one up on the screen too. And you basically, this is how you get served. You flip it on yes, please, which means bring me some mo. And then if you don't want any more, you turn it over to the other side, and it says no, thank you. Now, personally, I keep it on the yes, please. They do have a salad bar. I call it the sissy bar, but it's over there in the middle of the restaurant. And I don't know why you would ever eat the salad there because, I mean, if you're going to go, you're going to eat some meat. And the thing about it is whenever you go to a place like that, you always eat too much. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. But here's the wild thing. I mean, I remember the first time I went, and I ate so much food. And I mean, I put it in this leg, and I put it in this leg. And I was like, and when you eat all that meat, you don't really feel it until about 3 hours later, and you're laying in the bed, and all of a sudden you just start breaking out in a sweat. You can't sleep, and you're like, what in the world's going on? You realize you just ate 12 pounds of meat. But you know the interesting thing? What happens the next morning? You wake up, and you are starving. You're like, where's the breakfast buffet? I started to think about this in regards to people's lives, and Jesus made this statement in Matthew chapter 5, verse 6. Look at your notes. You don't need to turn there, but look at your notes or on the screens. Matthew said this in the English Standard Version. He said, blessed are those that hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be, what does it say? Satisfied. Everybody say satisfied. We live in a world where people are looking to be satisfied. They are searching, they're starving for satisfaction. They're starving for happiness. Matter of fact, 1 in 5 people in America are on an antidepressant medication. 1 in 5. That means 20% of almost 400 million people in America deal with depression on a regular basis. They deal with unhappiness. And sadly, they just keep flipping the card over and over and over in their life. They jump from relationship to relationship looking for satisfaction. They jump from job to job looking for satisfaction. They jump from church to church looking for satisfaction. They jump from pastor to pastor looking for satisfaction. They're constantly flipping the card over, trying to get their fill of something that will never fill them. And as I think about going beyond ourselves, I really believe that we as the church are the ones who have the answer. How many of y'all agree with that? Jesus said, blessed are those that hunger and thirst for righteousness, for right standing with God. We, the church, have been given the responsibility, honestly, to feed people the Word of God. To serve up a table. That's why I have this table up here today, because I'm going to talk about this table. To serve up a table of food that's not natural food, but spiritual food. And every weekend, people come into this church, and they're so in awe. I meet them all the time. I meet them out in the Walmart. I meet them at the grocery store, and they come, hey, Pastor, you know, I've been coming to Freedom House for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and there's just something about your church. I don't understand what it is. At that time, it's your church. You know, it's not, they haven't adopted it as my church yet. You know, that's how people go. They go through the stages of your church, that church, the church, and then my church. It takes them a little while, but sometimes they finally get to the my church stage. Hopefully you're at that my church stage where you're saying, this is my church. You've taken ownership of this place. You've taken ownership of the table that serves up the satisfaction of God in people's lives. And so that's what we're called to do. And so they come and they go, there's just something, I can't put my finger on it, but whenever I come, I feel so welcomed. I feel so loved. And some of them don't even know me. They've never met me before in the hallway or anything like that. And the point is what they're sensing, what they're feeling is the presence of God. They're sensing the love of God. Where does that love come from? Is it saturating the walls and the chair? No, it comes from us. It comes from our attitude when we come to the table to serve. Jesus made this statement. You can turn over this in your Bible in John chapter 6. Look over in John chapter 6. I want you to see this in your own Bible. John chapter 6. He had just fed the 5,000 with the Captain D's number 3. And, had a couple pieces of fish, some biscuits. They didn't have sweet tea back then, but if they would have been serving it. It said, look at verse 27 of John chapter 6. It says, this is what Jesus, actually, go to verse 26. Look at verse 26. Jesus answered and said, the most assuredly I say to you, you seek me, because all the people started following. You seek me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate of the loaves and were filled. Verse 27, do not labor. Don't keep flipping the thing over trying to get satisfied. Do not labor for the food which only endures or perishes, that goes away real quick. But for the food which endures to everlasting life. What is that food? Righteousness, he calls it, which the Son of God will give you because God the Father has set his seal on him. Now shoot down to verse 35. He says, Jesus said to them, he's talking to his disciples and this group of people that have followed him, I am the bread of life. Everybody say, Jesus is the bread of life. Say it one more time. Say, Jesus is the bread of life. He says, he who comes to me shall never, check this out, never hunger and never thirst. He who believes in me shall never thirst. Now hold on a second, Jesus. Hold on a second. You just said just a few minutes ago, blessed are those that hunger and thirst. Now you're saying that if you get the bread of life, you'll never hunger and thirst. What is it? Is it either or? The answer is both. Because when you get satisfied by the presence of God, when you get satisfied by the bread of life, you will constantly be going after him with your life. And that's what it looks like when it comes to serving God. Our responsibility as the church is to set the table for the bread of life, Jesus Christ. Now, I don't know about you, but when my wife has a dinner party, it is crazy in the Maxwell house. Think about it. When you have a dinner party, you clean parts of your house. First of all, you clean the parts that everybody's going to see real good. Right? So now I want you to think about this. I'm going to use a parallel here because I want you to think about the church and what we're doing for the community when it comes to serving the community the bread of life, setting the table. Every Sunday, every weekend, we set the table for people to come to know Jesus Christ. And so people get upset and go, why are you trying to be so excellent with everything? Well, don't you do that when you invite somebody over? I mean, you don't keep the plastic on the furniture when people come over. Come on now. We used to have plastic on my furniture back in my old days. We had plastic runways. You had to walk down the middle because you weren't allowed to walk off if you even tripped and fell on the carpet, get back on that plastic. But when people came over, the plastic came up. You got to go into areas of the house you've never experienced before in your entire life. Come on, someone help me preach now. Some of you getting delivered right now of the plastic demon. The demon's just coming out of you. Just coming out of you. Jesus. But when you have a dinner party, check this out. You get everything together. And you don't serve the food that you like. You serve the food that they like. You call them and you say, now tell me exactly, sweetheart, what do you like? Do you like fried chicken? Do you like mashed potatoes? Do you like pizza? Do you like pizza? What do you like? And so you prepare the meal for those who are coming. And you get everything ready. You put everything there. You get the table. You pull out the best china. You sit the kids down and say, listen. Now listen to me, sweetheart. There will be no burping at the table. When you have a question, you raise your hand. It's like school on dinner party days. Matter of fact, just don't even say anything the whole night. Please. You might mess it up. Because some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because when the kids are in the house and they're young, they'll say all kinds of stuff. They'll be telling on you. Let me tell you what Mommy did yesterday. Is this a bad word? It's the truth, isn't it? We have, and so when we set the table, we got to realize that there are people around the table. So I want to talk about 3 people that sit at the table. 3 people that sit at the table. The first person that sits at the table is the mature. These are the people that make up the majority of the church. And the mature people are the ones who are the backbone of the church. These are the people who understand what it means to set the table. They understand what it means to serve the bread of life because they've received the bread of life. They understand what it looks like to serve. They understand. And they understand that God has a word for them every single weekend. Every time they step foot into the doors of the church, they come with such an expectancy because they know that God's going to speak to them that day. People come to me all the time and they say, Pastor, how did you know what I was going through this week? And I say, well, we monitor your email. We have a video that follows you around. No, that's not true. We don't do any of that stuff. Well, maybe a little bit, but no, we don't do any of that stuff. God knows exactly what you're going through. God knows exactly what you need. God knows exactly what your marriage needs. God knows exactly what your family needs. Exactly what you need to hear that day. Let me tell you a couple things about the mature. The mature form the foundation for those who are coming. The mature. They form the foundation. It's your prayers, mature people, mature believers. It's your prayers that set the atmosphere for us to have service at 9 and 10:30 and 12 every single weekend. It's your prayers. It's your faith. See, I think it's really good sometimes to realize how important you are to the table. How important it is for you to come ready, prepared every week. It's your faith that creates the expectancy in this house. It's your faith. You say, well, I'm trying to get faith. Yeah, but you still come with a level of faith. You say, but isn't that your job, Pastor? I'm going to tell you what my job is in a few minutes. But your job as the mature is to come with expectation. Expectation, write this down, expectation on 2 levels. Number 1, expectation that God, you're going to meet me where I am. That God, you're going to feed me today. That God, you're going to minister to my heart. So I'm coming expecting to hear something from me. And then, the second level of expectation is I'm expecting you to touch someone else's life. And I'm going to create around me an atmosphere of the presence of God. I'm not going to come to get the presence of God. I'm going to come with the presence of God so somebody else can get him. That's what the mature prepare. Check this out. The mature prepare the atmosphere for God's presence. That's what the mature do. They prepare the atmosphere. When the mature come, when a mature believer comes, they're not coming to worship. They've already worshiped. They're coming with the presence of God and bringing with them the presence of God, bringing the atmosphere of worship. They're coming. Remember, worship's not for us anyway. Really? Right. Come on, I didn't get many amens. I got 3 amens right there. Worship is not for us. I still only got like 6. Maybe I need to explain this a little bit. When we come to worship, we're worshiping God. It's not about whether you like the music or not. It's not about whether you like the words or not. That has nothing to do with it. You should be able to worship in the middle of the most dark place spiritually that you've ever experienced. If you can't, then how can we expect the presence of God to show up in church? This is really a place for you to practice. Because if you can't worship in here, when the devil comes and starts messing you up, what makes you think you can do it then? What makes you think that you can turn around and go, well, I'm going to worship then? No, when fear comes, I've been in some fearful situations, and that's when the worship turns on. And it's because I've practiced around other believers that when there's no believers, I can lift my hands and begin to worship God. That's what a mature believer understands. Let me just mention a couple other things about the mature believer. The mature believer gives to make things happen. They give to make things happen. They give their time. They understand the power of serving. They give their talent. They understand the gifts that God's given them, and they're willing to give them back. They understand that they've been given resources, treasure, to give. They understand the principle of the tithe. They understand the principle of sacrifice. They understand the principle of willingness. Jesus was in John, why don't you turn back there, just a couple chapters back, John chapter 4. Jesus was having a conversation with a young lady who had really been turning the chip over and over and over, trying to find satisfaction. She had been through 5 men. She was living with the 6th man. And she was talking to Jesus, who happened to be the 7th man. It's kind of interesting that, she had 5, she was living with 6, but now she was talking to the man who was called complete. So he was about to complete her by putting his finger on the very thing that was incompleting her. Are you with me? And so he calls her out and says, you think that relationships are going to fix you. You think that all this relationship stuff it's not going to fix you. I'm the one that can fix you. God can change your life. And then, and before all this started, he had sent his disciples to get him some food. They come back, and in verse 27, it says, at this point, his disciples came, and they marveled that he talked with a woman. Yet no one said, what do you seek? Or why are you talking to her? The woman then left her water pot, went her way into the city, and said to the men, come see a man who told me all things I ever did. Could this be the Christ? And they went out of the city and came. In the meantime, his disciples came, Rabbi, eat. They brought him some chicken and some biscuits, and he said to him, I have no food. I have food to eat of which you do not know. Now, why did he make that statement? Well, he's going to clarify it in just a second. Therefore, his disciples said, did somebody bring him a sandwich we didn't know about? Jesus said, my food is to do the will of him. Now, let me just leave you with this last point as the mature believer. The mature believer understands that they sit so that they can serve. They sit at the table not just to keep feeding, but they sit so they can understand how to serve. Now, let me just talk about the second person at the table. I got to get my chair for this one. The second person at the table is somebody that's a little different. The second person at the table is the immature. And the immature, they sit at the table, and they sit in a different type of chair. You can see this chair right here. Don't break. The worship is too short. I want some more food. That teaching's not deep enough. I can't serve there. Nobody will see me. The immature are diet driven. I call it, they have the spiritual Dunlap disease. Their spiritual belly Dunlapped over their Bible belt, and they can't see their toes anymore. They haven't seen their toes in 10 years. I want this. I want a parking place. I want a front row seat. I want. And they're the ones that make all the noise in the church, the immature. Come on now. Say amen or oh me. All right, I got to get out of this chair because it's going to break. This is not a high chair, by the way. This is an I chair. And that's where the immature sit. They sit in the I chair because it's all about I. It's all about me. Church is all about me. Church is built, it's for me. It's for me to come and get what I need. That's the immature speaking. The immature, I love what Paul says to the immature. This is what he says in 1 Corinthians. You can look at your notes because I got it in a different version. In the Living Bible, it says this in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 1 through 3. It says, "Dear brothers," listen to what he says. He's pretty strong here. "I've been talking to you as though you were still just babies in the Christian life, who are not following the Lord but your own desires. I cannot talk to you as I would to healthy Christians or mature Christians who are filled with the Spirit. I have had to feed you with milk." Basically, you can put in parentheses, I've had to part the whiskers so I could stick the bottle in. "I've had to feed you not with solid food because you couldn't digest anything stronger. And even now, you still have to be fed with milk, for you are still only baby Christians." You're just babies. Controlled, notice how he describes the immature believer. Controlled by your own desires. Everything's built around me. Sit in the I chair, not God's. When you are jealous of one another. So you're seeing right here now, you're seeing what Paul's describing as an immature believer. That person who is driven by their own desires, who is focused on jealousy or competitive attitude. They're always in a place of comparison, jealous of one another, and divide up into quarreling groups. These are the ones, the immature Christians are the ones who try to create cliques in a church environment. They're trying to create their own table because they don't want anybody else to sit at this table. And if they do, it's judgment, it's ridicule, it's not forgiveness and grace and mercy. It's, I'm going to look down at you because you're not where I am in the I chair. Let's keep reading. He says, when you are jealous of one another and divide up into quarreling groups, doesn't that prove that you're still babies, one in your own way? In fact, you're acting like people who don't belong to the Lord at all. Now, I'm making fun, but let's be honest. Let's be honest. Not in this service, but we know some people who are immature, who are in their I chair. Let me give you another thing about, so let me just write, you can write these down. The immature are diet driven. The immature sit in the I chair. Here's the third thing, is the immature are emotionally bipolar. Now you know exactly what I'm talking about, especially if you have kids. Because they'll sit in that chair and they'll be like this. I got some ice cream. I got some ice cream. And you can't have none, and you can't have none. I got some. I dropped my ice cream. They're bipolar. They're up one day, down the next. Up one day, down the next. Up one day, down the next. Whatever's hot, I'm going to run after. The average immature believer hops churches every 2 to 2.5 years. Every 2.5 years. It's just a study. It just plain. They just go from 2 to 2.5 years. They're going to another church. Why? Because the pressure of a good, healthy church is trying to get you out of the I chair. Now, let me just clarify this because I want to make this really clear. I'm not talking about somebody, maybe you've been coming for a very short period of time and this is, you're learning what it looks like to get outside of yourself. That's okay. But when it's been 5, 7, 10 years and you're still in the baby seat, it's time to get out. It's time to get out. Just some things about the person that's immature spiritually is is they flip-flop around from what's hot to hot. I see it all the time. It used to be back in the 90s, it used to be conferences and evangelists. They would go from one evangelist to the next evangelist to the next evangelist to the next evangelist. And they'd follow them all around the country, never plugged into a church, never planted. Wondering why their family was all messed up. And most of the kids that grew up in those environments were all jacked up because their parents were all over the place, all over the place. They never commit, they rarely give, they never tithe, they don't serve, and they complain the most. And the saddest thing of all is church leaders tend to put all their emphasis on the squeaky wheel. My philosophy is, if the wheel is squeaking, let it fall off, we'll put a new one on. That's my philosophy. Just let it fall off. It'll eventually fall off, and then we'll get a new one. But I'm not going to keep oiling the same wheel over and over again for 10, 15 years. There's a time where you got to take the bottle out and start chewing on some steak. Now, here's where it comes down to my job. Look at Ephesians 4. You can just look at this in your notes, 11 through 14. Paul is writing to the church, and he says this to them. I'm almost done. And he himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers. That's called the fivefold ministry. Basically, you see the fivefold ministry in operation in every church. You see evangelism, you see the prophetic, you see the apostolic, you see pastor, you teacher. I'm a pastor teacher. That's my job. And here's what my role is in the church. What pastors' jobs are. It says, and some pastors and teachers for the equipping of the saints for the work of the ministry. My job is to equip you for the work of the ministry. Churches stay small because the ministry expects the pastor to do all the work. But my job is to push you out of the nest and challenge you. And if you've been coming for any amount of time, you realize this is a challenging environment. You're going to be challenged to serve. You're going to be challenged to sacrifice. You're going to be challenged to give. What is it to benefit the church? No, it's to benefit you, and as a result, to see God move in the city and in our environment. And so he says, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a perfect man, to the measure of the knowledge, measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we should. Now, here's the reason why the challenge or the equipping comes. To the immature believer, it's that they should no longer be children tossed to and fro and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men and the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting. In other words, what Paul is saying is that it's the role of the church to get you out of the eye chair and into a seat where you can grow so you can serve, to do the work of the ministry. Our vision at Freedom House Church is to equip people to experience, to experience Christ's freedom in their everyday lives, not just on Sundays. It's for Monday to you to go home and realize the freedom that's available for you. You say, man, well, I've kind of blown it. Well, Jesus dealt with a guy who blew it. Jesus dealt with a guy by the name of Peter who blew it. Literally denied Jesus. In one chapter, he says, I'll follow you, Jesus, wherever you go. I'll follow you. If even I have to die, Jesus, I'll follow you. Next chapter, I don't even know that guy. Who is he? I've never heard of him. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never followed anybody like that. Rooster crows, conviction comes. And then Jesus, after he's raised from the dead, comes to Peter on the shore 3 different times. He asks him, do you love me? First time he says, tend my sheep. Do you love me? Take care of my sheep. And then in verse 17 of John chapter 21, he said to him the 3rd time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him a 3rd time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. Jesus, you know it all. You know everything. You know I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. 3rd chair is the chair of the seeker. The mature, the immature, and the seeker. Only 20% of our community comes to church on a weekend. 20%. That means 80% of people in Charlotte, North Carolina, are sitting at home on Sunday mornings. And it's my goal, this is what God has called us to do, is to create an environment, a table where people can come and receive a relationship with Jesus Christ. To know that they can come and be filled with His presence. We're going to do everything we can. Everything we can. Now, the average person that comes to church in the 21st century comes 1 to 2 times a month. 1 to 2 times. That means in any given year, there's 52 Sundays. Any given year, if somebody comes 1 to 2, let's just say they come twice a month. That would be 21 times that they come. 21 hours of the table being set before them. How important is it for that table to be ready when they come that one time? It gives you a lot of perspective when you start thinking about that person. You may be that person today. You may be. And I hope and pray that you would come back next week and dine at this table. That you would come and receive the bread of life. Maybe you're trying to get on that journey, but we have to always recognize that there is a seat at the table for the seeker. For the person that is wanting to know something about God. Just spiritual in a way that's connecting somehow for them to touch God and for God to touch them. Where we park and how we do. Let's create an environment. As volunteers, let's leave the front row for the people who are coming. The best place. Let's provide for them. Let's create an atmosphere as the mature that is vibrant with the presence of God. Lifting our hands. Why? Because then they go, why are you lifting your hands? Because I love Jesus. Standing up for what God is for. Being a standard bearer for Jesus. Read the scripture in Isaiah 42. And I'll just close with this story in just a second. And I believe this is a word for us as a church. For you and me. This is what he said in Isaiah 42, verse 18. He says, pay attention. Now this is God talking, not me. This is God talking. Pay attention. Are you deaf? Open your eyes. Are you blind? You're my servant and you're not looking. You're my messenger and you're not listening. The very people I depended upon, servants of God, blind as a bat, willfully blind. You've seen a lot but looked at nothing. You've heard everything but listened to nothing. God intended out of the goodness of His heart to be lavish in His revelation. But this is a people, now he's just talking about the seeker. This is a people battered and cowed, shut up in attics and closets, victims, licking their wounds, feeling ignored and abandoned. But is anyone out there listening? Is anyone paying attention to what's coming? One of the greatest kings in the Bible was a guy by the name of David, King David. And King David one day was sitting at his table. And he was enjoying a meal, and all of a sudden, he just thought, man, why am I sitting at this table? How have I experienced such an amazing time in my life? This is incredible. I mean, I am the king of Israel, and look at the servants that I have and the wealth that I've accumulated. Look at all the revelation I have. God, you're so great. Who can I honor here on this planet? What can I do right now? And he remembers his friend Jonathan, a friend that he had made a covenant with back during the first King Saul, who wasn't such a great king. And David remembered this guy by the name of Jonathan and a covenant he had with him. And he says, does Jonathan have any children? Find me, servant. This guy named Ziba. He said, Ziba, go and find me a relative of Jonathan that I can honor. And he goes to a place called Lodabar. A place in the word Lodabar means depression. A place where darkness is. And there's a guy by the name of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth was crippled in his feet. And everywhere he would walk, people would know exactly who he was because of his crippledness, and he was dropped when Saul was killed. His granddad was killed, and his nanny, the person who was supposed to be taking care of him, dropped him. How many people do we know that have been dropped spiritually? How many people do we know that have been dropped in life, and they're walking around paralyzed and crippled by life? And so David says, I want you to come to the king. Now, his thought is, he's going to kill me. He's got to kill me. What is he going to do? How is he going to respond to me? And I love what David does. He says, you know what, Mephibosheth, I want you to come, and I want you to sit at the table with me where you belong. Your dad helped me get here, and I want to honor you. Now, here's the cool thing about it. He was sitting at the king's table. He was dining with all the great servants of the day, all the great people of the day of Israel. He was crippled in his feet, but when he sat at the table, he was just like everybody else. He was just like everybody else. Maybe you're here today, and you've been crippled by life. Maybe sin has crippled you. I want to tell you something. You got a place at the table. You got a place. You can come and dine on the bread of life. Let's pray together. Father, we just thank you so much for your grace today. We thank you so much that you've prepared a table for us to come in whatever way we are, however we are in life, no matter what place we're in life. God, you can come and change us. You can come and deliver us. If you're here today, and maybe you've walked away from the table and you want to get back to the table to receive from God. You want a relationship with Jesus Christ. It is the only way you're going to be satisfied. Every head bowed, every eye closed. If you're here today and you say, I want a relationship with Jesus, I need that relationship. I've been flipping the card over and over trying to get fed from somewhere else, relationships or women or men or beds or whatever. And you want to get right with God today. I'm going to count to 3. When I hit 3, I want you just to raise your hand. I want to pray with you today to receive that awesome, incredible relationship with Jesus Christ. You can do it. Today's your day. Today's your day to come home. Today's your day to come to the table and sit with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. 1, 2, 3. Just lift your hand if you say, that's me. I see your hand. Awesome. I see your hand. If you run away from God, lift up your hand. Once you've raised it, you can put it down. I see hands, 2 or 3 hands over the building. Awesome. Who else? Who else? Right there on the left. Awesome. Awesome. You've been crippled spiritually. Maybe you came out of an environment at a church and somebody dropped you, a leader dropped you, and you've been real hesitant. I want to pray for you. Would you just lift your hand if you say, that's me? I've been real hesitant. I don't know if I really want to connect with church again because that pastor before did this and that leader did this. If that's you and you know in your heart, you've been holding things back. You've been holding your talents back, holding your time back, holding your treasure back. Just lift up your hand. I want to pray for you too. Hands all over the room. Hands all over the room. Let me just pray for all of you that raised your hand today. Church, would you join with them? We're just going to pray a prayer of blessing and a prayer of commitment today. Just say this with me. Say, Lord Jesus, I believe that you died for me. I believe that your blood, Jesus, was shed for me. Forgive me today. I commit my life to you. Heal me from the inside out. Jesus, I want to serve you. Would you open my eyes to what area I can be significant in? I look forward, God, to hearing your voice. In Jesus' name, speak to me, Holy Spirit. Amen. Why don't you stand up and give the Lord a big clap? Hope you learned something today. Come on. Come on.